because we believe in things that are on the left. We're sensitive. We care about the environment. We care about society. We care about the have-nots.
Right.
But within that culture, the dominant force is becoming this toxicity that we're talking about. And so these men can't say, I have issues relative to being a man. Can somebody help me? Because they'll get laughed at, right? That's why our first guest here on this podcast is that person, because that's exactly what he's going through. So number one, this kind of toxicity on the left is growing so much that men who need help and are in crisis are afraid to ask for it. And then the second part is, I think that we just lost an election over it, likely, or that was a contributing factor to it.
At least a contributing factor, for sure. Yes, I'll say it again. The world needs men. And full stop. I don't have to say, and also something else is true. Some other time I'll say that. But not now. The people on the left, the philosophical, thought leaders of the left who you're describing here, are not open to this discussion that we are having. Now, maybe they can be open to it. I hope they can be open to it. But right now, I don't think they are. And I'm not interested in talking to the brick wall. I'm interested in talking to people who are open about it and who aren't going to be offended. Like, nobody is here to say one is better than the other or somebody isn't in the spectrum of deserving humanity. That's the ground rules. Now, no snowflakes allowed. There has to be a deeper level of honesty. And if you can't have the strength of your convictions and hear people who don't think like you do, and maybe even think differently and opposite of you, and try to work out some truth between you, well, I'm not interested in further battling the sexes or in further isolating ourselves one from another, or in, or in maintaining these cultural tropes of us against them.
What is going on, everyone? Tis Miyanovich, and I welcome you to the main dojo, the place where we process the raw struggles of men in an unprecedented paradigm. There is something inside of you that wants you to be more than what you are. But there also may be something inside of you that wants you to go down. And for some of us, that means going down for good. So, remove your ego, drop your bullshit, become vulnerable, and step into the dojo, mate. Hello, everybody. It's Miyanovich. Salanka-lankum. Salanka-hankum. Let's have a rabbi on and make fun of religion. It's early in the morning, and I don't know if I'm still tired. The caffeine's working or the caffeine's not working. But I can't tell you all. Welcome to the dojo, by the way, and I can't tell you all how much I hate recording intros. It has nothing to do with the guests. I love my guests. They're amazing people. But in a world where you're just constantly giving your fucking soul away for free to try to make amazing things happen, it's just one more thing that you have to do in a list of a million little things that you have to do every day. Old Miyanovich is leading in this world, whether people can tell or not. And I am in some thick ass, nasty jungle. I've got a couple different kind of machetes that I'm working with to cut trail here. And the Mang Dojo is one of these machetes. But when you're hacking through the jungle of what's happening in the world right now, and by the way, I do bona fides. I do definitely believe we're in an apocalypse. but not in the way that most people define apocalypse. We are in a massive paradigm shift for the human species, and it's having massive effects on people, whether they realize it or not. And I think we haven't even, in terms of the potency of the apocalypse that we're in, we're not even at 25% of the effect of it yet. So old Miyanovich is in the jungle of the new apocalypse, cutting some trail, and I've got some weapons and some tools and some machete action. And this podcast is one of those things. However, it's exhausting to cut through the jungle all the time. And it's exhausting to finance it yourself. And it's exhausting to be doing everything for fucking free all the time. So eventually, for the old podcast here, the Mang Dojo, I will give people the opportunity to help the dojo, donate to the dojo, etc. Always mangdojo@gmail.com. mangdojo@gmail.com. Hit me up with anything. You can hit me up with anything. Step through. Our guest today is an old friend and really one of the best minds that I've come across in my life, for sure. And as I've said in previous, and I believe I said this in the intro episode, there was a time in life where old Miyanovich really went after wisdom and knowledge and had teachers from all over the world, really heavy gurus, heavy cats, and really knowledgeable people. And without really trying this time around, or at this phase of life, I was able to come across Hillel Norry, who is another one of these heavy cats, and an irreplaceable type of thinker, a rationalist, who has a larger ecumenical, spiritual, religious viewpoint also. Very, very important. But I've known Hillel for a while. If you want to know about Hillel, you can go to hillelnorry.com. And that's it's actually 3 L's total, 2 in the middle and 1 at the end. That would be HILLELNORRY. Hillel, I know you're listening. You got a lot of double consonants fucking going on in this name here. It's almost as bad as Mississippi. Okay, so Hillel Norry is awesome. If you want to know about my dude, Rabbi Hillel Norry, check out his bona fides and his qualities over at hillelnorry.com. He's done so much in his life and is another Renaissance dude, and has certainly been exposed to or on the teletube, the television. He's been on CNN. He's been on CBS Morning Show, Fox and Friends for a number of different issues. I know Hillel because we're both involved in the world of liberal gun ownership. And Hillel is a firearms instructor. He's into the martial arts. And this is where I know Hillel from. But we are broadening now our connection out into greater things. Because as hopefully you will hear, he's got a super important anchor in terms of rationale. And that kind of anchor is something we need now, because the world is just fucking ridiculous at this point. It's just fucking ridiculous. And I think more than most things, the world needs some OG, lo-fi, old school human wisdom. And that's kind of where Hillel and I are very connected. We're both into that. And we both exude that. And he exudes it much better than I do. Certainly, there's certain people that are born with gifts. And there's a reason why he's a rabbi, because he was born with a gift in his voice and in his brain. And we're going to share that gift today. as we talk about the crazy bretzely world of being left of center and being a man and trying to deal with what's happening mostly on the left. I'll make one more note here. You will notice that we spend a lot of time criticizing the left side of the philosophical spectrum and not the right. And that is because, so I will say this, there are issues with the interpretation of maleness and masculinity on the right and on the left. But Hillel and I have been eating the particular shit sandwich of being a part of maleness on the left. So this does not mean that there isn't horse shit on the right with defining and dealing with masculinity and maleness. That's true. We do cover a little bit of that, but the predominant analysis today is on the stuff we have to deal with being a part of the American left. So this is our little shim sham introduction to Hillel Norry. Check him out, hillelnorry.com. And I invite you in on this conversation. I think it's very, very important and is an indicator of where this podcast will be throwing its anchor down and where it will be going in the future. So without further ado, please join me for this conversation with Rabbi Hillel Norry and step into the dojo, man. So I heard somebody say once, the interesting thing about conspiratorialists, conspiracy people, that if you take a psychological view of it, what's interesting is when you have somebody who's a conspiracy theorist and you present them any kind of information and it's outside of the previous boundaries of their conspiracy and challenging the inside of the conspiracy, they won't take that new information on and look at it objectively to maybe adjust the conspiracy inward into something smaller. What conspiracy theorists always do is they just widen the conspiracy to include all of the new information.
Right.
Right.
And it ends up reinforcing.
Exactly. So
they believe more.
And so that's why this shit is dangerous. All you do is with just that conspiratorial deep belief phenomenon, if it comes from a place of existential crisis or existential potency, if you just add weapons to it, you can see why, number one, it's enormously powerful, but two, why
it's a drug,
or why it will fuck the world up, or why it will fuck any situation up. But then we leave the light. That's the problem.
I can't do it. Got to have light over heat, man. Got to have it.
Yeah. Well, the same thing is happening worldwide via the internet, and a lot of people with purist type and absolutist type views. And you can't win, man. You can't. No. I mean, I've been dealing with it in our own community, liberal gun ownership for well over a decade and a half now. And it doesn't matter that the person is a liberal. It doesn't matter that their main view in life is how do I wrap my arms around everybody in the world? That's their main view. That's the main view. Those people turn on everybody with conspiracies all the time.
Yeah. I see it in my own, I got rabbi friends who are who believe all the Trumpy bullshit. And these are very smart people.
Yeah.
In the world of intellect, they're way up there.
Yeah.
Graduate degrees, the whole deal, lead communities, read foreign languages, doesn't matter.
Yeah. We have on the podcast, I have been introducing a term because I don't know if you listen to the introductory the number one podcast for the Mang Dojo.
Just a few minutes of it.
Okay. So you should probably listen to the whole thing if I'm going to publish your episode, because it really is cut and dried. I'm not fucking around. I'm not going to be bowing to PC. So the whole thing is, 108, the podcast is going to be, this is my new way in life. 80% awesome, 100% heart, 70% politically correct. Yeah. That's what I'm going to give you.
There is a time for not being politically correct.
Yeah.
There is.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, make sure maybe you listen to that whole episode, just so you know, if you're Rabbi Hillel Norry and you're friends with Randy, and he's going to publish your name again next to this podcast, I'm also going to be using words like retarded. And there's reasons for that. One's a funny reason. The other is a technical scientific reason. And, legitimately, I don't know a better word to describe what is happening with people now. There is like a scientific retardation that en masse that I've never seen. And it's interesting. I'm bringing this up because you said you've got these friends that are rabbis and they're intelligent, they're educated. Well, retardation can exist inside of a person who has 170 IQ.
Absolutely. I've seen it. I know it.
It's like you would think one would travel with the other. Not true.
Yeah. This other friend of mine calls it the sanity inversion.
I love that.
I do too. I've started using it. It's the sanity. It's the retardation of sanity.
Yeah.
Right. It's the inversion of it. That is a big part of the masculinity issue.
Yeah.
Is the inversion of expectations. We can talk more about that, but like the polar shift that's taken place.
Yeah. I'll bring us back around to the sanity inversion thing. Because male psychology is it's in some ways it's quite simple, in other ways it's complex. And but what I wanted to start off with, middle-aged men and cascading issues, the issues that come along with being middle-aged men. Oy vey, like yes, right. So what I've been seeing is, and the reason why I launched the podcast is in our group, in the community that we're in, the shared community that we're in, I have about 30 people, most all of them men, who are helping me develop LGO. And the amount of problems that these men have is astounding. It's almost unbelievable.
It's hard to bear. When you know it, it weighs.
I'm like, is it just these guys? Is it because I'm pulling people off of the internet and a lot of people who are very online seem to have more problems? Is it gun owners? Is it liberal? Is it all of these things together? And then I look outside of the circle and I'm talking with people and it seems to be there also. So there's a mismatch between at middle age somewhere between what men are capable of handling. We're capable of shouldering up, squaring up on problems. But at some point, it seems like the amount of problems that is coming around to men is too much for one man to be able to square up on, and men are drowning. So this is what is happening, and we're losing people.
Yeah.
People are dying. Okay.
Yep.
And so
friends.
Yes. Friends that are highly capable.
Right.
And
talented.
Beautiful.
Wise.
Yes. Beautiful people.
Beautiful people.
And they're falling off of the fucking cliff. And, so for every, for the few people that we've lost, there's 10 other dudes where they're telling me on the side, like, I thought about killing myself. I was there. Right? So for a sample of 30 guys, it's actually like 27-ish, because there are some ladies also who will also be on this podcast. I'm like, what in the fuck is going on here? And while we figure it out, I just thought that the podcast would be the best vehicle to get at it. To both be like a therapy session for people. Other people can hear it. Other people from outside of the community can join in. But there's really something going on here. And I just wanted to see do you see this around your life? And we're talking about not just people. I know everybody's suffering, but men in specific. Do you see any difference between men suffering 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and today?
Well, I do. I don't have sort of the anthropologist's bird's eye view of it, but I have a really tight knit group of male friends, some of whom I've known for my whole life, guys I grew up with who I'm still close friends with, which I think is unusual. Not everybody maintains lifelong friendships, especially men. And I have a really tight group of college friends, all guys. The guys group. I mean, I also have girlfriends from back then, but um, and and those friends are, they're a vital part of me and who I am. And I've watched as they face all of these life challenges. Um, and while sickness is not unique to men, um, the expectation of how men get sick and how they're supposed to be sick um, is different than the expectations of women and how they're supposed to get sick. And so it's not that men are the only ones who get cancer and that sucks. And gosh, why do men have to deal with cancer in midlife? Because everyone has to deal with that. But we have to deal with it as men. And that comes with all the stuff and all the cultural expectations and our personal expectations. Um, and you know, I don't know that um, we were that we had the skills to necessarily always deal with it all that well. And there are men in that small group of friends who aren't gun owners, aren't on the line all the time, aren't in any of those categories. They're just, my friends who've also taken their own life. And to the shock of everyone else in the group, like, what? Which just means that they have been carrying that struggle silently for years. So it's not just the problem that they were having, the issue, the ostensible thing. It's compounded by their alienation and their isolation, even from their closest friends. Like, we talk, we travel together, we poke fun at each other. We've known each other for 40 fucking years, and I didn't know this.
Yeah. Yeah, the compartmentalization of the emotional and psychological reality for a man away from the others is a real fucking deal. And my guess is, as you know, I like to trace it all the way back to the beginning because I've had a particular opportunity to research anthropology and evolutionary realities and things like that, spending time in amount of time in it that most humans will never. And certainly if you study the origins of Homo sapien and how Homo sapien likely came out of what was there, you can see why there's the need to just shut the fuck up and swallow and deal with that leader, because everything might have depended upon it. I told a joke in one of the previous episodes with our first anonymous guest that even though this doesn't match the history, I always say this: if your job is to leave the cave every day or every other day and go punch the balls off of a dinosaur, then you're not really going to be a touchy-feely person. You have to shut up and go punch the balls off the dinosaur, and maybe you get to work out your feelings later. And if you're punching the balls off a dinosaur every 2 days, that's a lot of compartmentalization. So it's probably in our DNA to one degree or another, generally speaking.
And yeah, I think so. And I think there is a particular generational challenge for us now that we're entering that phase of life, because, like, who were our role models for how to deal with that stuff? Like, unless you really had an unusual parent or you had really good teachers who went beyond just the subject matter and taught you about life, um, whose father or grandfather shared with them their struggles with psychology, illness, alienation, difficulty, sex, all that stuff that people are dealing with that like my father was not a closed book. He was not a unemotional man. I hugged him, we kissed, we loved each other. Like we said those things. I didn't have a father who never said I love you. But I have no he never conveyed to me, here's how you deal with disappointment and struggle. I'm struggling, Hillel, and here's how I'm dealing with it. No, I mean, this was just, and I'm sure his father was even less so. I know it. And while I was very close with my grandfather, one of them, he never talked about that. It just wasn't what they ever talked about. So you have to pick that stuff up along the way. Um, he taught me how to dress right, how to travel, how to be a mensch, how to be a gentleman, how to work hard and play hard. I mean, he taught me a lot. But the inner stuff, the inner life stuff, um, that just wasn't in the common, subject matter for him.
It is probably because our existence is so dependent upon often. And I'm not saying that this doesn't happen with women too. Of course it happens with women.
Yeah.
It happens with non-binary people. It happens
Right.
with all humans.
Right.
But there's probably, not probably, there's a social and reinforced social component for men to just make things happen and go and then make the next thing happen.
Right.
And
Well,
that's the baseline.
yeah, like I was thinking, I think a lot of men were told in one way or another, boys don't cry, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I was not taught that.
Yeah.
I wasn't. I was taught it's all right to cry, and
Nice.
and I am a person who cries. But I know men who were taught that and who like my experience is not, that expandable to everyone's experience. And I know a lot of people who it was just, emotional life, you don't talk about it. And
Yeah.
especially the hard emotional life where there isn't an answer right away and where you just it's just hard.
Yeah.
And yeah, that expectation that you will be able to carry that burden without sharing it with somebody is it's very, very difficult.
Yeah.
And yes, I'm sure it happens with women. I'm sure of it. But here's the thing: it's not a battle of the sexes. Okay,
No, us for
we don't have to have exclusive ownership of some human difficulty for it still to be difficult for us, and maybe in a different way.
right. So here, let me interject and ask this question. This is a good question. Since you have probably one of the most perfect families to ask this question about. Are there men and women? Is there such a thing as there's a man, there's a woman? Does that exist? Or is that a construct that is completely inaccurate? Is there such a thing as a man and such a thing as a woman? I think it's an important question.
I do too. I also think it's an important question. And I guess my simple answer is yes, but, right, which is, that's often, my go-to answer is, well, it's a gray area.
Right.
Um, there is a difference. There is such a thing as men and there is such a thing as women. I think there's people in my family who would probably say that's not true. Or that while that is true, it's true in the most limited way, in the most limited sense.
Mm-hmm.
And like so many things, a thing can be true and not true 100% of the time. Like if it's 98% true that men are men and women are women, then it's true. Even if there is a percentage of people who it's not true for them.
Yes.
And, you and I both know people like that.
Yes.
People who were one and are now the other.
Yeah.
And not superficially
Yes.
or because of some cultural moment, but genuinely. And so while to me it's a definite yes, like I'm a man, but there's no clean line, right? Like so many of those things, like when does one thing become another?
Yeah.
There's not a clear line necessarily. And some people really straddle the line. We all know people like that, um, but the fact that it's not easy to identify the line doesn't mean that when you get over it, you don't know that you're over the line and that the other thing is now true. So I'm a man. I think I'm a masculine man. I don't know, like we could talk about what that means. And again, like to me, that doesn't mean I never cry because I cry often. I deal with life's, difficulties. I bury people. I visit them in the hospital. I see them in the jail. I'm in touch with my emotions and I allow them fully. But that's not unmasculine to me.
Yeah, I would say as an aside, I would say I agree that you're masculine, and I think you're more masculine than I am. And and to me, these things are obvious. So you definitely have that in your genetic makeup. There's a crispness to your maleness that my maleness doesn't have. But I'm also not anything other than a male also.
Right.
And,
Right.
and at this point in my life, nothing else is going to show up. This is what I got.
Right. And look, I guess I'd never really thought about it that way, but I guess I'm there's I'm glad. Like there's a relief in having clarity of who you are, and I think it is hard for people who don't have that to know because the world can be very, very binary, even though like when you get to the edges, binary starts to drift away and not be quite so binary. But when you're in the main arc of the curve,
Yeah.
one is one and two is two.
Yeah. And I think it's important for the purpose of the podcast to set up the understanding, which I think both you and I share, which is it doesn't matter if the person is male, female, in the middle, whatever the expression is. Everyone in the graph is valuable.
Yes.
And
Right.
no one should be given value greater than others in terms of the essence of their humanity. Everyone is equally valuable.
Yes, for sure. And it bears articulating clearly because you could come to the erroneous opposite conclusion. And that is not the conclusion I'm coming to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we certainly have something to contend with, which some people would call toxic masculinity or something akin to classic masculinity combined with stupidity or retardation, which we will talk about.
Yes.
Which loves to conclude for itself that the only strong thing on the planet is the thing that's in the male camp and thoroughly in the male camp and gate kept by certain characteristics. So strength can only be associated with maleness that holds perhaps 10 baseline characteristics. And then when you get outside of that, everything else is not strong. Everything else needs that area of, we'll call it classic maleness, right? Everything on the planet is not strong, but what is strong is this version of maleness, which is also bullshit because strength and the measurement of human strength most certainly leaves maleness. You can observe it in other areas easily, other than maleness.
Right. And strength is part of a suite of qualities that includes resilience, perseverance, endurance, delayed gratification. These are all aspects of strength that are not uniquely male and are not. They are masculine qualities,
Yeah.
resilience, but they are also feminine qualities, as it were, the
Yeah.
qualities of many, many women. Women sometimes make better endurance athletes rather than strength athletes. And so is one's, like these are aspects of strength, not strength is not like one single thing.
Also, I think it's important to point out that so the idea that courage or strength and courage would only look, or sacrifice, or great courage, great strength, and great sacrifice would only look like a square-jawed Marine running at the beaches of Normandy to, to take shit into the face and go take it to Hitler. Like that's strength, and that men have been sacrificing themselves in that way for thousands of years, or tens or hundreds of thousands of years. But the immeasurable amount of women that have died in childbirth since we've been a species to try to get this whole thing to move forward is somehow not recognized as something on par with charging the beaches of Normandy, which I think is entirely bullshit.
Well, and the men who aren't squared jaw Marines charging Normandy in World War II, but who nonetheless demonstrated unbelievable strength and courage in the face of Nazism.
Yeah.
Like the Janusz Korczak, one of my personal spiritual heroes, who was the leader of the orphanage in the Warsaw Ghetto. Right? There were hundreds, thousands of orphans in the Warsaw Ghetto, and he ran the orphanage. And the Nazis gave him the opportunity to live and stay while they liquidated the children from his orphanage. And he said no, and went with them because they were children and orphans and could not be left alone. And he faced, his own demise so that those children did not have to go alone.
Yeah.
Right? I don't know a lot of Marines who would do that.
Yeah.
In other words, and he was a small, intellectual, probably effeminate man who had an unbelievable reservoir of strength and courage. Yeah. So, like these jumps to, stereotypes are so unhelpful. And I feel like they all fall into the battle of the sexes mentality where it's men against women. You got to be men. You got to be, that's so idiotic.
Yeah.
And yet so many discussions of this always seem to revert back to that. Right? I'm like, do you think this is a battle between us?
Clearly. I want to just reverse a little bit back to, is there a man? Is there a woman? Mm-hmm. We've answered that. There is, and there isn't, right? There is, but, right. And there is a continuum range in there that we're talking about as well. The idea that if you removed all of the social constructs around it, man is this, woman is this. If you remove the gender constructs and other constructs, if you remove those advanced versions of those constructs, that then everyone would fall into a sexless, universal beige state. Now that's out there.
Yeah, but that is just, that's just bullshit. I don't know. I'm going to call that out. It's just like, okay, that's an intellectual exercise. I won't say bullshit. I'll give it a little more, credit and say that's an interesting intellectual exercise, which I would be willing to go through. But but the conclusion is no, that's not true. And for a couple of reasons, I think. One is people like to pretend like biology doesn't count.
Sure.
But guess what? Biology trumps everything. It underlies everything. We are biological animals.
Yeah.
Look around.
Yeah.
And people always like to find the unique exceptions in the animal world where the males aren't the males and the females aren't the females. And to me, that again, if it's true 99% of the time, but there are cases where it's not true in nature.
Yeah.
All that does is prove that it's mostly true.
Yes.
And mostly true is pretty compelling biologically.
Yeah.
If you took away, first of all, you can't take away all the social construct. You can shift it slowly over time, but you cannot take it away. And it's at your own harm that you imagine that social constructs are not rooted in biology. They are, of course. I mean, to think otherwise, it's self-evident that that's true. We've had a whole generation where women can be construction workers, and some women are construction workers.
Right.
But the compelling majority are not. Why? Like, is that just social pressure? I don't think so. There are always going to be examples of a woman boxer who could knock out a male boxer.
Yeah.
The Billie Jean King thing. But again, it's a misunderstanding to believe that that disproves that there is men and there are biological and physical qualities to men.
Yeah.
Maybe in 10,000 or 50 or 100,000 years, those things will be different. Maybe. I mean, we are still in the process of evolution. The natural world is changing. So it could be that there's some place down the line where males are not stronger.
Right.
But right now they are. Right? I don't live 10,000 years in the future, and I'm not planning on it. I live now. And 99, I don't know, I don't like to use specific numbers, but the compelling majority of male boxers can defeat the compelling majority of female boxers. That some cross over, that there's some overlap where females are stronger than males, just shows that it is not absolute, that these things are not absolute, but that doesn't mean they don't exist.
I always think it's good to highlight as well, while what you just said is absolutely true, if you built a time machine and you took one of these elite female sprinters like Sha'Carri Richardson or Abby Steiner, and then you picked one or two of the elite female javelin throwers, and they're all super attractive humans. Like they look amazing. They're powerful. And if you took four of those women and you put them in a time machine and you put them back in the south coast of South Africa between 190 and 130,000 years ago, when we're in natural selection regime from the climate, and there's very few humans relatively on the planet, and these are the humans that are going to decide the parental gene pool for the rest of all time. And you take those four ladies and you put them back there with all of those men, you're going to see an entirely different race of humans. You're going to see an entirely different race. And those four ladies, like hunting, are going to be whipping the asses of almost every one of those dudes once they get familiar with the techniques and the land and the landscape. Their capacities to run, their endurance, their ability to throw, it's just going to whip those dudes in the ass. Right. So it's not like, so if women, like elite female athletes are below male athletes in performance, it's still enough for them to go somewhere and create like an Amazonian genetic reality because it's so fucking amazing. Right. I always think it's important to point that out.
Well, it's interesting because those are qualities that we, is that to be praised in women, the quality of, physical prowess and ability? There was a time, I think, maybe not that long ago, where a female javelin, thrower would not have been seen as an attractive female. Maybe. And because that was not, the desired female qualities.
Yeah.
That's an overlay on the quality itself, whether it's desirable socially and culturally or not.
Yeah.
Like, do you want a physically big and strong woman, or do you want a physically small and petite woman, is a social overlay on the realities of biology in the aggregate.
Yeah.
Not in the individual cases, because you can always find a Bobby Riggs, you can always find a Billie Jean King,
Yeah.
because humans are incredibly diverse, incredibly diverse. But how many 7 foot tall Asian basketball players are there? One,
Right.
right? I mean, there's like one. That's it.
Right.
Right. So, and I'm, that's not me being, I don't think that's me being bigoted or racist or, xenophobic or any of that BS either. It's just the reality. And all this ability to see beyond what you correctly point out are millennia, epoch long trends
Right.
that have only been partially unraveled in a small portion of the human population in the last 100 years. Like, that's all new.
Yes. Well, anthropologically speaking,
Anthropologically.
quite new. So we operate using mental heuristics or shortcuts because the brain can't really just do the long cut all the time. It can't. It just doesn't have. My God, we would be frozen
Right.
if our brain wasn't taking shortcuts. But we also have social heuristics, shortcuts that we take so that everybody agrees upon something and we get moving forward. Mm. Sometimes these social heuristics then they generalize and they cut off the nuance of the reality. But right. That's their problem. That's their weak point. Their positive is it can get everybody moving and going.
Right.
So we have social heuristics. And I feel like gender is one of those social heuristics. Like there are men and there are women. And now hey, there's non-binary people. That's a pretty right. easy one to do. There are men, there are women, there are non-binary people. Let's get moving.
Well, the heuristics sometimes run roughshod over people who don't necessarily fit them.
Yeah.
Even though they're beneficial because they allow you to make decisions and to, like you said, keep things going. But they do inherently sometimes exclude or run roughshod over people who don't necessarily fit. You have to be somewhat conscientious of that.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So that's why I'm bringing it up, because of concepts like white male patriarchy, these highfalutin, really intense right. kind of absolutist concepts that come from the further reaches of the left, basically always answering that gender is a construct, right? Yes, it's a construct. It's a heuristic, but we wouldn't use it if it didn't have massive benefit to what we're pointing out, which is over the entirety of the operation of humans, the vast majority of people are going to fall into two camps. And when we do shit, we can't always be thinking about that, and often we don't, because it's assumed that the vast majority of people are going to fall into two camps. So let's get moving based upon those two camps. And that can be quite unfortunate, as you said, for the people that don't quite fall close to those poles. And we're learning about that. And it is unfortunate, the negative results.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to point out, because I don't think I've ever said it, that we develop heuristics like gender because the group has benefited from them phenomenally for a very long time. But it is also shit on people for a very long time too. Yeah. But we benefit from it.
Well, if you look at some of the ancient, late antiquity literature, you see that they were not unfamiliar with this stuff.
Yeah.
Like, we like to think a lot of this is new, but they also understood in the first century that not everybody's a male or a female.
Yeah.
It sure seems like most people are, but not everybody is. And we need to, have a sociocultural way of understanding those people. And look, sometimes historically it has been a very negative sociocultural way,
yeah.
but not always. Sometimes it has also been just an acceptance that there are category-defying realities. That's all.
And I bring it up, of course, as you say, I agree. We've been aware of this. Humans have been aware of this. I bring up the whole gender as a social heuristic and a reality and something that we've benefited from and also others don't benefit from it. Because it's, as you say, it's not going to go away. We're going to adjust it over time. But the very idea that we are going to topple the way that society works and get rid of the males and females, or get rid of this is male, this is female, or get rid of fashion for women or fashion for men, or it is entirely a moonbeamer bullshit. Like, it is just nowhere near possible.
No, it's not. It almost can't be when you think about it. Like I said, evolution is still taking place. We're still being impacted and influenced over a slow time period by all of the processes that produced what we have right this moment. That's not stopping. So the fact that it produced this, is a pretty reasonable testimony to its benefit.
Right.
Again, not that it's without its harm on others. Like, I do think that's important to acknowledge, but the notion that we're going to have a genderless world, I think is divorced from reality.
Yeah.
I think in its best, as if it's understood at its best, what it means is not a forced gendered world, like
Yes.
where people can be different and one can adopt the ways of the other. That, okay, it's a gender-free world in the sense that if you want to be a boy who's a girl, you can, and there's room for you, acceptance of your humanity. But the notion that is somehow going to be true for everybody and not just for some bodies, I think it's just divorced from reality.
Yes. So in the current environment that we're in, it's almost as if you and I might have to apologize for believing in what we just said, or biology. We might have to apologize for just recognizing, in a way that's not absolutist, but just the observable facts of human biology and science. Not that science is perfect, but that we might almost have to apologize for acknowledging not just biology, but that there are men and there are women, and those things exist in addition to the other things that exist.
Right.
That somehow we're supposed to be afraid and worried to talk about such things. That would be the first part of the I guess the next question. The other one I would put into that is, are we allowed to say masculinity anymore? It's like we have to be afraid to talk about the word or acknowledge it, that it's there, because the entirety of it is toxic or a construct or some sort of a con on humanity.
I want to start there because to me, the expression toxic masculinity is a perfect example of the battle of sexes mentality. We all know that there are people who take qualities beyond their healthy level. Any quality can be, when taken beyond its healthy level, is toxic. Compassion, if taken beyond its healthy level, makes you a doormat, and it is toxic. You have to limit and balance your compassion. So, yes, if you're some, roid rage man, women eat meat, if you're that kind of, of course, that's like a caricature of masculinity. That's not what masculinity is. That's taking it to its absurd extremes, and anything you take to its absurd extremes becomes toxic. But I reject that term because masculinity is what I am. That's a word that means nothing, but it's a set of parentheses placed around something so that we can talk about it as a set of qualities. Not an absolute set, a movable set, a variable set, but nonetheless a set of qualities. And to say, because now it's not just some masculinity is toxic, it's masculinity itself. It's legitimate to consider that toxic. And to me, that just means like you would never do that the other way around. You would never say that about women. And maybe this is payback for years of men, dominating society and culture, but I think that's stupid. Payback for, oh yeah, well, you were on top for a while, so now it's our turn.
Right.
Like, That's exactly battle of the sexes mentality, and what it gets you is a battle. So there's nothing wrong with the way men are, and there's nothing wrong with male qualities and the qualities which most men tend to portray. There's nothing inherently wrong with male sexuality. Like, is it toxic masculinity to like big boobs? Is that toxic?
For certainly not.
Of course not.
Right.
But you wouldn't know it to talk in some corners of contemporary culture.
Right.
Like, to say such a thing would be, we would have to apologize for it.
Yeah.
But it's a pretty old part of male biology to like boobs.
Sure. Or
And
any body part.
right. And it is not an unhealthy one. To stigmatize it is actually unhealthy. Now, if all you like is, plastic surgery, exaggerated caricature, and you mistreat women if they don't have big boobs, or you stare at women's boobs in public all the time, well, what you are is a jerk.
Right.
Right? Like, and guess what? There's jerks. Like, there's a bunch of men who are jerks.
Yeah, historically.
But like once you're, I don't know, once you're, a 20-year-old man, and you learn like, oh, okay, I have male sexual drives, but when I'm talking to a woman, I look her in the face, because that is how polite people deal with each other. It's, dare I say, gentlemanly.